Good morning, grandkids. It's time for another chapter out of my book that I'm writing about young Dorkly, the wizard. This is chapter 10 today. Back at the palace, Dorkly was down in his tunneled out favorite room, working at his scrying table. He had watched General Bannister and Dermis all the way into Longport. Bannister was carefully staying off the road as King Conley had instructed him, and had not been accosted by foe or animal, which Dorkly found amazing. The same with Dermis. Did they both have on a foe repellent? Dorkly had to chuckle. If it had been me out there, he said to himself, I'd have been attacked by anything and everything. He continued to watch carefully as Dermis left his horse and entered a cottage. He looked back at the general and noted that he had went into a small building nearby and was now sitting upstairs in front of a window, keeping an eye on the cottage which Dermis had just entered. Now things might get more exciting, Dorkly said, as he chuckled and turned his whole attention back upon Dermis. Dorkly loved being a wizard, especially this part, what he lovingly called enchanted spying. Dorkly smiled broadly as he looked back into his scrying bowl. He loved secretly watching people. He followed Dermis through the living room into his small bedroom. Rather than watching him undress, he let his eyes travel around the room. There only seemed to be a bed with a nightstand, a table, and chairs near a window, and pegs on the wall for clothes. Dermis was hanging his weapons up on a peg, and Dorkly got a surprise. There, beside that peg, hung a lady's dress and slippers on the floor below. He looked quickly back over at the bed. Well, 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 he whispered. Things are becoming a lot more clear about Dermis. Wait until the king hears this. Too bad the general doesn't have eyes in here, but that's what I'm for. He smiled. He loved being a wizard. Dorkly looked at the female lying under the covers. He could see her lovely hair, mostly tossed over her face, but he could still see that she was quite pretty. He watched Dermis pull her into his arms and snuggle her in comfortably. He just barely heard Dermis murmured endearments to her. He heard the word love and the name Maddie. Dorkly slowly looked up from his scrying and whispered, Wow, wondering what the king would say about this. Are they just together, or is he married? He continued quietly talking to himself as he looked back just as Dermis was rubbing her tummy, and he heard, My son. What? He hurriedly left the scrying, grabbed his pointy hat, and rushed up the stairs and out the door. Well, 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 he kept exclaiming in awe and excitement. Well, 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 hurrying on to the king's chambers. He hurried up to the guard outside the king's door. Tell the king I'm back, he was almost shouting. He was so excited. If he's not up, wake him up, now. The guard said, Are you sure about this? It's late. And yes, the king has retired. I don't care. He doesn't care. It's important. Get him. Dorkly was jumping around, flailing his hands around, and knocked his hat to the floor. As he was stooped over picking it up, the guard opened the door and went in, shutting the door in Dorkly's face. On purpose, Dorkly was sure. The guard approached the king's bedroom and knocked on his door. The king woke up, slipped out of his canopied bed, put on a robe to cover his sleeping gown, and shoved his feet into some slippers. Then he hurried to his door. He just knew that Dorkly would be waiting, and he could already feel excitement, worry, and some anxiety. He opened the door to the guard, who told him to go back and take Dorkly to the sitting room and tell him that he'd be right there. The guard looked a little bewildered, like how did the king know it would be Dorkly? But he left to obey the king's instructions. Then Conley hurried into some kind of reasonable attire for this time of night, at least, and left his bedroom. Dorkly was traipsing back and forth in the sitting room, his hands behind his back, then flapping around as he was talking to himself, then hands behind his back again. When the king walked in, he whirled around and started babbling. "Sit down, Dorkly, and slow down," the king said. "You're not making any sense. Take a deep breath, then tell me what you found out." Dorkly sat down on the edge of a chair, took a couple of deep breaths, and looked at the king. As the king waited, he dinged a bell to summon a servant and told him to bring something hot for them to drink, and then turned to Dorkly, saying, "Go on." Dorkly took another deep breath, then said, "Well, first, the general is set up in an upstairs room just up the street from where he watched Prince Dermis enter a cottage. He's set up with food and drink and a chair directly in front of his window, ready to spend the rest of the night keeping an eye on things." "Good, good," the king said, nodding his head. "Go on." "I watched Dermis enter the cottage and start undressing for bed, very quietly, not like a man who would be alone. Then I saw," and he took another deep breath, "I saw a woman's dress hanging on another wall peg with dainty slippers on the floor. I was kind of surprised, but I must say, not really. I let my eyes travel quickly over the bed, and there she was, a lady with flaming red hair, all snuggled down under the covers. I was hoping I would get to observe more, but they were soon asleep." "Oh, of course," the king smirked at Dorkly. A woman, you say?" And his voice tapered off as he thought about that. "Go on," he finally said, rolling his hands at Dorkly to continue. The king was getting a little irate with Dorkly. "Did they talk? Was anything said that you could hear? Go on, go on." "Well, sire, he got into bed and snuggled up with the woman, holding her close, and murmured into her hair, moving his hand over her belly." He looked up at the king again. "I know, sire, that it was surely my duty for my report to continue to watch, no matter what they might do." The king gave Dorkly such an angry stare, his face was turning red. "If you don't get on with it, I'm going to call a guard and have him clap you in the irons. Now get on with it." By now the king was almost shouting. Dorkly straightened up real quick and was almost babbling again. I very faintly heard him murmuring, "I love you." Then as he moved his hand over her belly, I heard him saying, "My son." "What?" the king snapped. "My son?" He said, "My son?" "Yes, sire, that was all." "My gods," the king almost whispered. "I have a grandchild." "A grandchild? Do you suppose it's really his, Dorkly?" "I wouldn't know, sire." "By all the gods, I have to know." "You may retire now, Dorkly. I'm sure you need some sleep. On your way out, tell the guard to come in. I have a task for him. Oh, and thanks, my young wizard, for your report. Dorkly left, sending in the guard as requested, and hurrying back to his crying bowl, because he wanted to see what all was going to be happening now. He was rubbing his hands together, a big grin on his face. The guard entered, and the king said, I want you to go quickly to Longport. Pick up the guard, who's there in a local inn near the back of the town. Then I want the two of you to go and collect my son and the woman that he's with, and bring them to me. The other guard knows where they are. Bring them both to me. By that time, I will be in the throne room. Don't allow them to give you any excuses about not coming. I want them both here. And that's the end of that chapter. So we shall see how it's truly going on, and what the king's going to get to find out, what Dermis's reaction is going to be in front of the king, and so on, when we come back the next time. So I will see you later, grandkids. Bye-bye.